The dinner table felt warm that night, the kind of warm that tricks you into thinking everything is fine. My sister-in-law had just finished her third glass of wine, and she was laughing a little too loudly at something her husband said. My mother-in-law was cutting her chicken into precise little squares. My brother-in-law was scrolling his phone under the table thinking no one noticed. And I was sitting there, 31 years old, a software engineer making more money than anyone else at that table, wondering why I still felt like I needed to earn my place in it. That night changed everything. But I need to take you back a little first, because the ending only makes sense if you understand how long the beginning actually lasted. I married into this family when I was 26. My husband passed away 2 years later, a car accident on a Tuesday morning in March. The kind of ordinary day that becomes the line that splits your life into before and after. We didn't have children yet. We had just bought furniture for the second bedroom. I went back to work 3 weeks later because staying home felt like drowning in slow motion. I want to be clear about something. I grieved. I grieved deeply and privately and for a long time. But I also survived. I got a promotion 8 months after the funeral. I bought my own place, a 1-bedroom condo in Austin. The following year, I started therapy. I started running. I built a life that was genuinely mine. And some mornings I woke up and thought, I am actually okay. His family never quite forgave me for that. Not openly. No one ever said anything directly. That's not how it worked with them. It was more like a slow accumulation of small things, a tone of voice here, a pointed question there. His mother, who I'll call my mother-in-law because she asked me to keep calling her that even after he died, used to look at me sometimes with this expression I couldn't fully read. Not unkind exactly, just assessing. Like she was deciding what category I belonged in now. His sister, my sister-in-law, was more direct. She always had been. She had 3 kids, a house in the suburbs, and a husband who worked in sales and was frequently between jobs. She was the kind of person who translated her own financial stress into opinions about other people's choices. If she was struggling, it was because the economy was unfair. If you weren't struggling, it was because you were lucky, or cold, or had forgotten what mattered. I had forgotten what mattered. That was the implication, anyway. What mattered, apparently, was family. And family, in practice, meant money. It started small. The first time was maybe 18 months after my husband died. My mother-in-law mentioned very casually that her car needed a repair and the timing was bad. I offered to help. Of course I did. She was his mother. The check was $400. Then my sister-in-law's youngest needed braces. $1,200. I told myself it was a one-time thing. Then my brother-in-law, her husband, lost another job. They were behind on rent. My sister-in-law called me crying. $3,000. I transferred it the same afternoon. Then my mother-in-law's property taxes were due and her pension hadn't stretched far enough that quarter. $2,200. I want to be honest with you. I wasn't doing this out of pure generosity. Part of it was guilt. I had survived and my husband hadn't, and his family was still grieving in a way they showed by struggling, and I wasn't struggling anymore. And somewhere in my head, those two things got tangled up together. I thought that helping them was the same as honoring him. I thought it was what he would have wanted. I also thought, for a long time, that they were grateful. Over 4 years, the total came to somewhere around $80,000. I tracked it in a spreadsheet, not because I expected repayment, but because I'm an engineer and tracking things is how I process them. $80,000. That's a down payment on a house. That's 2 years of my salary before I got promoted. That's a number that still makes me go quiet when I say it out loud. And they were grateful, at first. But gratitude, I've learned, has a shelf life. After a while, the money stopped feeling like a gift to them and started feeling like an expectation. The calls shifted from, "I'm so sorry to ask," to "I was hoping you could help with something." The thank you texts got shorter, and then they stopped coming altogether. What replaced them was something I didn't have a word for until much later. The closest I can get is resentment dressed up as concern. My sister-in-law started making comments about my apartment. "It must be nice to only have yourself to take care of," said with a smile, every time. Just an observation, not a dig. You're too sensitive if you hear it as a dig. My mother-in-law began asking, with increasing frequency, whether I was seeing anyone. "You're still young," she'd say. "You don't want to wait too long." I was 30 years old when she first said this to me. 30. My brother-in-law, the one in sales, once told me at a birthday dinner that I had it easy because I didn't have kids and could just focus on my career. He said this to me directly, with no apparent awareness that my husband had been dead for 3 years, or that I had spent those 3 years partially funding his household. I smiled. I always smiled. I told myself it wasn't worth the conflict. What I didn't realize was that every time I smiled and said nothing and then transferred the money anyway, I was teaching them something. I was teaching them that there were no consequences. I was teaching them that I was available infinitely for whatever they needed and that I would not object, and that my objection, even if I had voiced it, would not have changed anything. The dinner I mentioned at the beginning happened last April, my mother-in-law's birthday. They'd reserved a private room at an Italian place in Westlake. Nice restaurant, the kind where the bread comes with olive oil in a little ceramic dish. I drove 40 minutes to get there. There were 8 of us around the table, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, her husband, their 3 kids, my brother-in-law, my husband's younger brother, who was in town from Dallas, and me. I was the only one there who wasn't blood related to someone else at the table. I had been thinking about that in the car on the way over, which maybe set me up for what happened next. Dinner was going fine mostly. The kids were loud but manageable. My mother-in-law was happy. We ordered appetizers and the adults had wine, and for a while it felt almost normal. Then my sister-in-law's oldest, she's 16, said something. She was talking to her younger sister about a girl at school, some drama I was only half listening to, and then she said, "She's going to end up like Aunt Renata, living alone with no kids at like 35. She said my name. She used it like a punchline. The table went quiet for maybe 2 seconds. My sister-in-law pressed her lips together. Her husband looked at his plate. My brother-in-law laughed. Actually laughed, short and quiet, before he caught himself. My mother-in-law said, "Okay, that's enough," but in the tone of someone managing a small social inconvenience, not of someone who is genuinely upset. No one said anything to me. No one looked at me. I excused myself and went to the restroom. I stood at the sink and I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I wasn't crying. I thought I would be, but I wasn't. I was just very, very still. I thought about $80,000. I thought about 4 years of picking up the phone when they called. I thought about the braces and the rent and the property taxes and the car repair, and every single time I had quietly, without making anyone feel bad, handed over money that I had earned sitting at a computer for 60-hour weeks. I thought about my husband, and I thought about how much he would have hated that table going quiet like that, and then I opened my phone and I called my bank. I had 2 things set up through that bank that were relevant. One was an automatic transfer I'd set up the previous year to help my mother-in-law with her monthly utilities. Just a small recurring thing, $200 a month, barely noticeable to me. The other was a joint account I'd agreed to share with my sister-in-law's family after her husband's last layoff, just temporarily, so I could transfer money easily when they needed it. I ended both of them. Right there in the restaurant bathroom. The customer service rep was calm and professional and had it done in about 4 minutes. Then I washed my hands, checked my reflection one more time, and went back to the table. I stayed for another hour. I ate my pasta. I helped clear the dessert plates. I hugged my mother-in-law goodbye and told her happy birthday and meant it. I drove home. I did not bring up what the 16-year-old had said. I didn't need to. The call started the next morning. My sister-in-law called me at 8:47 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 9:15. Voicemail. By noon, she had called 11 times. By 3 in the afternoon, 19. By the time I went to bed that night, the count was 34. She also texted. Long ones, paragraphs, some of them. The early ones were confused. "Hey, is everything okay? Can you call me?" The middle ones were escalating. "Renata, I really need you to pick up. This isn't okay." The later ones dropped any pretense. "You can't just cut us off like this. You know we depend on you. This is a family." That last line stopped me. "You know we depend on you." Not, "Thank you for everything you've done." Not, "I'm sorry my daughter said something hurtful." Just, we depend on you. As if that were a contract I had signed without reading. My mother-in-law called on the second day. She was more measured. She said she didn't understand what had happened, that things were fine at dinner as far as she could tell, and she just hoped we could talk. I texted her back, "I'll reach out when I'm ready." My brother-in-law sent me a Facebook message, we weren't even really close, that said, "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but my sister is pretty upset. Just thought you should know." I left it on read. On the third day, my sister-in-law called 34 more times. 68 calls in 3 days. I know that number because I checked my call log. I saved screenshots. On day 4, she sent her husband to call me from his number, probably thinking I wouldn't recognize it. I picked up because I didn't recognize it. He said, "Hey, this is actually going to be my sister-in-law. Can you hold on?" I hung up. On day 5, she called from a blocked number. I answered. She said, "How dare you do this to us?" Those were the first words. Not hello, not I'm sorry. How dare you? I let her finish. It took about 90 seconds. She said I was selfish. She said I had abandoned the family. She said her kids were going to have to deal with consequences because of me. She said that her husband had a promising lead on a new job and they just needed a little more time. She said her daughter hadn't meant anything by what she said at dinner. She was just a teenager. Teenagers say things. Then she said, "You're not even really family anymore. You're just the woman our brother married." I had been sitting at my kitchen counter with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. When she said that, I set the cup down very carefully. I said, "Thank you for making this easier," and I hung up. She called back immediately. I didn't answer. She texted, "What does that even mean?" I didn't respond. What it meant was this. For 4 years, I had stayed connected to this family partly because I felt obligated and partly because I was still, in some way, holding on to the last link I had to my husband. I had confused obligation with love. I had confused proximity with belonging. And in 90 seconds on a Friday afternoon, she had clarified everything for me. I was not family. I was a resource. And you do not owe resources to people who see you that way. I did not send a long explanation. I did not write a letter laying out the 4 years of transfers and the $80,000 and the dinner and the 16-year-old's comment. Some people told me later I should have. That I owed them an explanation, or at least a conversation before cutting them off financially. Maybe they're right. I've thought about it. But here's what I keep coming back to. I spent 4 years making things easy for them. I made it easy to ask me for money. I made it easy to not say thank you. I made it easy to not say thank you. I made it easy to make jokes about my life at a dinner table and then look away. The one thing I never made easy was for them to acknowledge that what they were doing was wrong. They weren't going to acknowledge it just because I explained it clearly. Some people only understand the conversation that happens after the thing has already changed. My mother-in-law and I still have a relationship of sorts. It's quieter now. She calls on my birthday. I sent her a card at Christmas. I think she knew on some level what had been happening, and I think she was ashamed of it, and I think she was ashamed of it, and I think that shame makes it hard for her to say anything directly. I don't need her to. We've reached a kind of peace that works for both of us, I think. I visit once a year. We don't talk about money, or my sister-in-law, or what happened at the birthday dinner. I have not spoken to my sister-in-law since that phone call. Her husband got the job, by the way. I heard through my mother-in-law he's been there almost a year. They're doing fine. I want to say something about being 31 and single and building a life that doesn't look the way people expected it to look, because I think that's actually what that dinner table was really about. Not just the money, not just my sister-in-law's stress or her daughter's careless comment or the 4 years of quiet resentment. All of that was real. But underneath it was something else. I think they needed me to be a little bit lost. Not struggling the way they were struggling, but at least visibly incomplete. The widow who was still figuring it out. The one who needed them in some way, even if they also needed her. That would have made the balance feel more equal. Instead, I bought a condo and got promoted and went to therapy and started running half marathons and was, by most measurable definitions, okay? And I think that bothered them in a way they never fully examined and certainly never admitted. My therapist once said something I keep coming back to. She said, sometimes the people who resent you most are the ones who watched you survive something they weren't sure they could have survived themselves. I don't know if that's exactly true, but it's something. My condo has a small balcony that faces west. In the evenings, when I'm not working, I sit out there with whatever I'm reading and watch the light change over the rooftops. It's not dramatic. It's not a view anyone would photograph. But it's mine. Bought with money I earned, in a life I built, in a city I chose because I wanted to live here. I think about my husband sometimes on that balcony. I think he would have liked the light. I think he would have told me years before I figured it out myself that helping people who resent you for it isn't generosity. It's just pain wearing a more socially acceptable shape. I am not the woman his family married. I am not anybody's resource. I am not incomplete because I am alone or grieving or 31 or whatever it is they needed me to be to feel better about themselves. I am a woman who knows what her time and money are worth. I am a woman who sat in a restaurant bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror, and made a decision. I am, on most days, genuinely happy. And that, in the end, is the only answer I owe anyone.